Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Amriteshwarye Namaha. Thank you all for joining us tonight. You may remember that we are in chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita. So we will now have a brief review of what we've covered recently, and then we'll move on to some of the final verses of this chapter, chapter 14. This chapter began with an introduction pointing to the glory of this rare, liberating knowledge. Then Krishna used the topic of creation, the creation of the whole universe, as a way to introduce a new angle on the same topic. That topic in chapter 13 was discerning Maya from the Atman. So how to see the Atman while we are in Maya. So everything that is changing is Maya, and the only thing that doesn't change is the Atman, and that is the pure consciousness, the light of consciousness. So the new angle that's coming up in this chapter is a focus on the Three Gunas, or we call it Three Guna in Sanskrit, which he explains early on in the chapter. These gunas make up everything in this universe, including our physical body, as well as the subtle body, which includes the mind and the intellect. And it is these very same gunas that are responsible for our being stuck here in samsara, because we identify with them. It's not really the fault of the gunas. It's our fault because we identify with them and think that we are those. In verses 5 to 18, 5 aspects of these gunas were described. The definition of them, the method that they use to bind us, the indications, like the tips that show you that you or some other part of your surroundings are influenced by which gunas, and the effect that the gunas have to us in this world as well as in the afterworld. So that took quite a few verses. And then after that came 2 verses that actually comprise the main verses of chapter 14. Krishna started explaining how to transcend those gunas, and the sadhana prescribed is jnana, or knowledge, the reward of which is the realization of one's oneness with God. So this is mostly what we've covered so far. But then from verse 21, a new section began with Arjuna asking 3 questions regarding the gunatitaha. Gunatitaha means the one who has transcended the gunas, who has gone beyond. And that means they're God realized, basically. And Arjuna wanted to know 3 things. What are the indications of a gunatitaha, one who has gone beyond the gunas, and how such a being conducts himself or herself, and how to become a gunatitaha. That last question simply means how to become a knower of the self, how to attain moksha. Well, the answer to Arjuna's first question, what are the indications of one who has gone beyond the gunas, began with verse 22 in the last class, and that is going to continue through verse 25 tonight. And the basic point is that the gunatita, or the one who's transcended the gunas, these gunas, if you don't remember, it's sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva is purity, rajas is mostly activity, and tamas is indolence, laziness, and ignorance. So the one who has gone beyond all 3 of these, that's what we mean by gunatitaha. And the basic point about them is that they accept these gunas, these qualities, and their fluctuations without any reaction, which is very hard to do, because when we are with people who are different from us, we have our qualities, they have their qualities, and then sometimes we say there's bad chemistry. Well, it's really hard to deal with that without any reaction. But the one who has transcended these 3 gunas is completely peaceful no matter what you throw at him or her. He accepts them also in his own physical and subtle bodies. In other words, the body may be feeling one way or another, but it doesn't bother them. The mind may be in one condition or another, doesn't affect them, because they know the whole time that they are none of those. And they also tolerate in the bodies and minds of other people. It could be a sattvic person, wonderful, but even if it's a very tamasic person, it doesn't affect their peace of mind. In other words, the gunatita remains unflapped in any and all external conditions, including the behavior of other people. The gunatita neither yearns for any guna or laments when it is gone. So we would say, typically we like to have quiet and like a peaceful, tranquil environment around us. So we are happy when we have such an environment, but then if we have to leave that, like ammas, ashrams and centers are usually very peaceful. I mean, they're all of them, or even the ones that are in like cities have a very quiet and peaceful atmosphere. So let's say you have to leave the center or the ashram and you feel sad that you have to go somewhere else. Then you would think, oh, I wish I could have that sattvic environment again. But even that they don't lament about. Just think about it. When Amma's in downtown New York City and when she's in one of her, ashrams in Amritapuri or one of the ashrams in the foreign countries that's in like a countryside setting, to her there's no difference ultimately. She's happy because everybody's happy, and it doesn't affect her inner peace and tranquility. So she does, just like the Gita says, she doesn't resent the presence of any guna, nor does she rejoice when they're gone. Due to the spiritual knowledge, such a being understands that the gunas and their effects cannot be avoided, so acceptance is the only way. And the gunas only affect the physical and subtle bodies, never the Atman. So one who is established in the Atman has no sorrow about the coming and going of these gunas. Now we will move on to verse 23 to find out more about the qualities of one who has attained that state. Verse 23. Udasina vadasino guneryo na vichalyate gunavartanta ityevam yovatishtati nengate. Again, as usual, I've taken some liberties with the translation. One who, sitting like a witness, or we could say as if indifferent, is not disturbed by the gunas, who, knowing that the gunas operate among themselves, stands firm and moves not. One who, sitting like a witness, as if different, is not disturbed by the gunas, who, knowing that the gunas operate among themselves, stands firm and moves not. So, this is a continuation of the topic, the indications of a guna titaha, one who has gone beyond all three gunas. I'd like to share with you some of the commentaries about this verse. It sheds a lot of light on the meaning. So a modern day commentator has said, a hill does not shake while the trees, plants, and vines on it shake when the wind blows. Similarly, the gunas move in the Brahmajnani, the one who has realized Brahman, but he remains calm, steady, and unconcerned with the happenings of the world. And Jnanadev has some really beautiful commentary, some words to share tonight, so you're going to hear a lot from Jnanadev starting here. With such full realization, he lives in the body in the way a traveler lives in a rest house on his way. Wouldn't that be great if we could just consider the body to be such a thing? The battlefield itself never takes part in victory or defeat. In that way, he takes no part either in gains or losses, and in no way gets mixed up with the gunas. He remains as indifferent as the life in the body. See, the life in the body doesn't care whether we're, doing one thing or another. It's just what it is. He remains as indifferent as the life in the body, or as a passerby, or as a signpost in a public place. The one of knowledge remains unperturbed in his heart at the coming and going of the gunas, just as Mount Meru does not totter by the flood of a mirage. So Mount Meru is like the fabled huge mountain. It's symbolic, of course. It's the biggest mountain in the universe. And so just imagine something much bigger than the Himalayas, Mount Everest, and there's a mirage flood. I mean, is that going to have any effect on Mount Everest? Nothing. So just imagine the biggest mountain in the whole universe, how little effect it would have on it. He goes on to say, the wind does not make the sky flutter, and can the darkness ever devour the sun? The dream does not deceive one who is wide awake. In that way, the one of knowledge is not fettered by the gunas, by these qualities. He sees them from a distance and marks their deeds in the way a spectator in a theater views indifferently the dancing of the puppets. Sattva remains engaged in good actions, Rajas in objects pertaining to Rajas, while Tamas in actions involved in delusion, ignorance, and so on. Know it well that all these different dealings on the part of the gunas are due to the power of the Parabrahman, in the way that all worldly transactions take place because of the sun. So just like without the sun, nothing could happen on this earth. Maya gets its existence from Brahman. Like we've said before, Maya is the shadow of Brahman. It's an easy way to think of it without going into too much technical detail. But it also means that the sun, just like the sun is completely neutral, the Parabrahman is also completely neutral in regards to what happens here on earth in Maya. And he concludes his commentary by saying, the sky remains calm, even though the wind blows violently and calms down in it. In that way, the one of knowledge remains unaffected despite the gunas' activity. O Arjuna, these are the marks by which one can recognize a person who has transcended the three gunas. So it feels like we have a long ways to go to get to that state. But actually it helps us to understand Amma. This is what her inner experience is. She may reflect our emotions and sadness, joy when we come to her for darshan, but inside she is like Mount Meru, completely unaffected. So if you go back to the previous verse, you'll see it's a similar kind of concept, but there is a difference between verse 22 and this one. Before, it was about the guna fluctuations, or like the fluctuation in attributes in the jnani's own mind, in the saint's or the sage's own mind. But here, it is regarding the fluctuations in other people. And it shows that in both cases, the knower of the self accepts the gunas no matter how they express themselves. Because, like Amma, they can adapt and accept everyone and everything, because they are not attached to anything, nor do they try to avoid anything. Amma, oh my gosh, every day we watch her, and these little kids who want to talk, I want to sing a song. And she's like, no, she's, big Swami may say, like, it's time to go, just to because he's concerned about Amma. But Amma just keeps, it doesn't bother her. So that's a sign that whether it goes longer or whether it ends early, it doesn't affect her. And the most important point is the reason why this gunatitaha can do this. It is because he or she never forgets that it is the gunas that make all these effects. They wield those effects, and it's just the gunas interacting with the gunas. So they know it has nothing to do with them and their own peace of mind. Now, if we look at the words, the actual words in the the verse, we'll see this very important portion of it is as if indifferent. As if indifferent. Or the other translation was sitting like a witness. It's very similar meaning, but I kind of lean towards the indifferent one. So, Shankaracharya says, like an indifferent person does not take sides, so too the gunatitaha, who is beyond the gunas, is also the same. He is the knower of the self. He is the true sannyasi, the true renunciant. The gunas do not disturb his discerning vision. This fact is clarified. He stirs not who is established in the knowledge that the gunas are transformed into the body, senses, and objects, and that they conjointly exist. So in other words, somebody who can see that this body, even the subtle body, which is like the energy sheath, the emotional sheath, the intellectual sheath, all these things are just made up of the gunas. They're actually inert. And without me, meaning the pure consciousness, none of them have any impact. They have no effect. So, knowing that truth and experiencing that truth, the jnani, the knower of the self, abides in the pure self without any influence from the gunas. Amma has said something in a different context. She said, let's say you have a PhD, and someone comes up to you and says, you don't have a PhD. You know you have a PhD, so it doesn't affect you what they say because you are established in the truth. You know that you have a PhD. So like that, if you know that you are the Brahman or the self, the Atman, then no matter what the gunas do in the environment around you or even to the body, we won't forget that we are the Atman. And it's important to recognize here that Krishna says, like an indifferent person. He doesn't say that they are actually indifferent. Because that could lead to adharma, negligence, and tamasic behavior, right? Oh, I don't care, just let whatever happen. No, Amma shows a lot of concern for people suffering. She will make extra effort to help people who need help, and so on. But it doesn't affect whether things go, correctly or incorrectly. It doesn't affect her peace of mind. And yet still she will always strive for that. She will always strive to help people. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that she becomes sad and she loses her peace of mind, because that is guaranteed that she will always have peace of mind being a knower of the self. So in what sense does Krishna mean like? Well, what we see is that it is their reaction that proves that they are inside, they are like an indifferent person. So they don't have any mental reaction. Externally, there may be a reaction. Let's say somebody says they tried to pass the MCATs or whatever it is, or in India they say whatever those O levels or something like that. They failed. Amma won't say, it's all Maya, don't even worry about it. She won't say that. She'll say, you have to study harder. And then every time they come, she'll say, did you study today? Did you study today? She stays on them because that is, a kind of compassion. She wants them to transcend their suffering. So she gives them little pushes here and there. But it's not really affecting inside of her. So the reactions are only on the surface. And by definition, a jnani or a knower of the self is always peaceful inside, no matter what is going on outside. Now, in a very active environment, a Rajasik person or a very active person will get heated up when the environment gets heated up. But around Amma, if you see the darshan, she is razor sharp, no matter how much chaos is going on around her. You yourself will just be completely, wonderstruck at everything she's doing. And the next thing you see, her hand is out and she's like, Prasad, did you, where's the prasad? And we're completely, mesmerized by her form, and we forget. But she's doing everything and she doesn't forget. So that is proof of her being beyond. But people who are Rajasic will always, we will get heated up. We will get confused. We will get dazed. We will get upset if things don't go our way. So, and the one who doesn't care at all is tamasic, doesn't pay any heed to anything unless it's affecting his well-being. That kind of person is tamasic. So for Amma though, it is going beyond all of the gunas. So she can adapt to any situation, any circumstances. So let's say, as an example, in our life, we're not there yet. We're not beyond all the three gunas. So we have to kind of visualize how those three gunas will manifest themselves in our life. So let's say you have a seva, you have some kind of task you're given, and let's say Amma gives it to you. Even if Amma gives it to you, there may be some struggle in accepting it. We have probably been hearing stories in the morning, at least in North America, it's the morning live streams. Amma gives somebody a job and they have some hesitance to do it. So let's say Amma tells you to take charge of composting here in one of the ashrams. So it's a really noble effort, but there are various ways in which your mind can look upon it and the way your body may engage in it. So let's say your mind might say, compost is so dirty and stinky. Why should we do it? Only if you do it wrong does it become dirty and stinky. But let's say that's what the mind says. Anyhow, it's going to get eaten by some microorganism, whether we compost it here or in the landfill, so who cares? So which kind of reaction is this? Is that sattvic? Rajasic? It's tamasic. Because basically the mind is trying to wiggle out of something that it doesn't like, even though actually it's a good deed that you should do. It's a very heedless approach. What about the Rajasic approach? This is actually going to be one that I think everybody's pretty familiar with. Let's say we have a good sense of responsibility and we take full responsibility for this task. But inside there will always be some irritation when people interfere or they tell us how to do things. It's like, I know what I'm doing, leave me alone. I'm going to do it my way. We have things like that crop up inside. Or we may think, I'm the only one doing this, nobody's helping me. My gosh, people are so, selfish, they're not helping me. We don't think about all the times we didn't help them. Anyhow, at that time we're so engaged in it that we feel resentment. And then we also tend to fight with people when we're trying to do our so-called seva. And after it's all over, like, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did it all by myself, Nobody helped me, but it's okay. No, I don't mind. No. Mentally, we were completely complaining the whole time. So this is very Rajasic activity. We take the credit for everything, and even though we were complaining mentally, we pretend like we didn't have any beefs about it. But what would the sattvic version be? Now, sattvic means better than the other two, but it's still not God realization. It's not amma level. It's not gunatitaha. It is just better than the others. That's all we can say. So what would the sattvic version of this be? Well, we do it well, probably. We do it responsibly, and not without an inordinate amount of ego. Maybe a little bit of ego is there. But we still have expectations of how the outcome should be. We want it to be just so, and if it doesn't go the way that we want, something inside of us will find it very hard to let go. We'll find it hard to accept the outcome. But there is one other option. Knowing that we did our best, if we can just remember that the outcome was only due to the gunas interacting with the gunas. I did the best I could, but the gunas, I can't control them. They will do what they want. So that's what happened, and so I can't be disappointed. This is closer to the gunatitaha approach, but not 100%, otherwise we would be God realized. But the more selfless our intentions are, the more we will be able to accept any and all possible outcomes. And that means a whole lot more peace of mind than we have now. We can sincerely try to accomplish what seems to be for the best, but if it doesn't work out, instead of being upset, we can feel compassion for anyone who was affected negatively by the outcome. And we can also understand that next time it might be me who gets affected by it. So that would be my karma, just like it's their karma now. So I should never complain no matter what happens, because today it was somebody else, tomorrow it will be me. Anyhow, we're all doing our best, and it didn't work out, so it was unavoidable. So like an indifferent person means that we are not attached to the action, nor do we react to the outcome, which is very hard, but we can make a practice out of it and see how it goes. Right now, the reality is that every action brings about some kind of reaction inside of us, and often externally too. And then all that disturbs our peace of mind, and you know what it's like. That's how life is most of the time for us. So this is how to get out of it. Instead, we should perform our dharma as well as we can, and then try to let go of the outcome. It's never been in our control, and it never will be in the future either. So the longer you try to control the outcome, the longer you're prolonging your suffering. So if you want to suffer, okay, that's a wonderful strategy, but I think most people would like to get out of it. And the next part of the verse is knowing that the gunas operate among themselves. That among themselves part is actually not in the text, but it helps us understand the real meaning of this part. So this is the ideal attitude, like I hinted at a little while ago, knowing that the gunas are just operating on themselves. The gunas in my body are interacting with the environment around me. My mental gunas are interacting with someone else's gunas, and that's why we feel like an affinity for somebody or some kind of resentment, or we don't like them. It's all just my gunas mixing with your gunas, and there's no right or wrong about it. So all people, all animals, even inert things like cars and computers, they all have different characteristics. Like you can't pour water on a computer, but you can pour water on your car and clean it, right? So that means that, computers and water are not friends. But cars, at least outside the car, is friends with water. So these are all gunas, and then they are all mixed up in different proportions in each item, each thing. So when it comes to the human level, some people are materialistic in nature, some are spiritual in nature, some are a mixture of the two. Some of them are introverted, some of them are extroverted. I mean, there's no good or bad about it, really. From our perspective, if we want to overcome our gunas, that's one thing. When we're looking at other people, we should just say, well, the gunas are like that. There's nothing to blame anybody for. So with this awareness, we can remain calm. And a jnani, a knower of the self, is always calm because they have that knowledge. So, and then you don't have to blame yourself or others for these things. And then Krishna says, he stands firm and moves not. Because he accepts everything, because Amma accepts everything, she's unshaken. Either, she says that it's my prarabdha to have to go through all these things. We know she doesn't have any prarabdha, but she takes on her children's prarabdha. So maybe she's referring to our prarabdha when she says, oh, it's my prarabdha for this or that. Or it's somebody else's prarabdha. Whatever it is, it's the nature of the world. So there's nothing we can do about it. We can try, but if it doesn't change, we have to accept it. So no matter how many waves hit the rock of Gibraltar, it remains unaffected like that. Inside we should be that. We can't control the body. It'll be affected, who knows. But still, internally we can avoid that effect. And with this verse, the topic of the characteristics of the gunatitaha, the one who has transcended the three gunas, is over. And Jnanadev says here, now hear how he conducts himself. And let us hear that in verse 24. Samadukha sukha swastaha samaloštashma kanchanaha tulya priya priyo dhiraha tulya nindatma samstutihi. Alike in pleasure and pain, self-abiding, regarding a clod of earth, a stone, and gold alike, the same to the dear and the disliked, firm, the same in criticism and praise. So this is how the gunatitaha, or the one who's gone beyond the gunas, conducts himself or herself. One commentator says, the gunas have not only assumed the form of the human body, they have also assumed the forms of various objects. And these forms interact with one another. The Atman is no party to these interactions. The knower of the Atman remains as the Atman, unconcerned with the workings of the gunas. Again, we have a beautiful commentary from Jnanadev who says, just as there is nothing but yarn in the fabric, the one of knowledge sees nothing else in the entire universe but their own self. Wouldn't that be wonderful if you just saw your own true self everywhere in the universe? I have a friend visiting me today. I think he wants to hear the Gita. Maybe next life he will get to be a human being so he doesn't have to fly around like this. Lord Hari makes gifts in equal proportions both to foes and friends. In the same way, he, meaning he or she, meaning the sage who has transcended the gunas, treats both pleasure and pain equally, like a balance with two pans. They're just equal. Everything's equal. normally, that the being must experience pleasure and pain while going around in the body. In other words, when you live in this body, you normally would experience pleasure and pain all the time. But the one of knowledge has dropped all feelings in regard to the body and has attained the Supreme Self, the Paramatman. The grain inside this seed becomes visible when the external chaff is removed. The rippling sound, the hurry and bustle of a river, all subside as soon as the river merges into the sea. Similarly, for one who has attained the Supreme Self, pleasure and pain automatically abide quietly in the body without making their presence felt in any way. So this is like Amma says. She says that the body, what happens to the body, she witnesses it, but it doesn't affect her. It's happening on the level of the body, and it has nothing to do with her actual experience. To a pillar in a house, day and night are treated alike. Likewise, one who has already become one with the Paramatman treats alike all pairs of opposites like success and failure. Now, this next example is a little bit, bizarre, but he loves to have analogies like that. Both contact with a snake or Urvashi, who's a heavenly maiden, are both one and the same to someone in deep slumber, right? So if a snake is crawling on you when you're in deep sleep and you don't wake up, doesn't matter whether it's that or it could be Miss Universe or Mr. Universe, it still doesn't mean anything to you. In that way, the pairs of opposites such as pleasure and pain are one and the same to one who has become one with the Supreme Self. The vision of such a person makes no distinction between animal dung and gold, right? The vision of such a person makes no distinction between animal dung and gold, between gems and pebbles, and so on. His equanimity in the self is never disturbed, whether the very heavens were to visit his house or a ferocious tiger to attack it. The evenness of his temper never gets ruffled, in the way a corpse cannot rise up again or the baked seed cannot germinate. Whether praised as God Brahmaji, the creator, or slandered as a lowly being, he remains as unaffected as a mass of ashes, neither burning nor getting extinguished. Likewise, he neither slanders nor praises anyone else, in the way there is neither darkness nor a lighted lamp in the house of the sun. So all these analogies show us so clearly, how profound that state is. And that is something that I'm going to refer to later on, because it's not just like trying to get better or like really struggling hard to get rid of these gunas, the effects they wield on us. It is completely transcending. So gunatitaha means completely beyond them. It's not like a halfway type of thing. This verse and the following one depict the conduct of a gunatitaha. The main idea conveyed here is that they are balanced under all circumstances. And that balanced state is referred to as samatva. It comes up in the Gita, several places. Sometimes it just says sama, samadrishti, samadarshana. These various words are utilized, but it means completely equal or total inner equipoise, despite the circumstances. Just think, Amma has to face the same exact external circumstances that we have to. COVID-19 and all these things, it's a big hassle for a lot of people. They talk about, mask fatigue and all this fatigue and that fatigue, But Amma is the first one to be extra careful about all these things, even while everybody's enthusiasm is flagging. So she's facing the same circumstances that we are, but her inner circumstances are completely different. I don't know if Amma has said it recently, but she used to say frequently, instead of trying to change our circumstances, we should change our inner stances, our mindset. Even if the person is a Jivan Mukta, somebody who has attained God realization in this lifetime and remains in the body, the body still has to undergo all the prarabdha karma that that person still has. It gets, for him or her, the effect of it gets burned completely by their knowledge of the self. But the body still goes through that experience. That's why you read stories about, like Ramana Maharshi also died, of some painful disease. Why do they have to suffer? They are not suffering. The body's suffering, and they know that there's a huge difference between that. So externally, they have to deal with the same things, but it no longer affects their mind at all. That's due to their inner equipoise. It's not just like the equipoise of an Olympic athlete or something like that. It is 100% tranquil mind, despite the external circumstances. So the reason why Amma emphasizes this point so much and so frequently is because no matter how hard we try, we cannot control other people and we cannot control the world. We can't even control our own body. The gunas in our body, it's just galloping along on its unstoppable journey towards death. Every day is one more step closer to death. And we see it in the body every day. The only thing we can control is our own response to what life brings us. That means the mind. And the whole subtle body, actually. These are all referred to as Antakarana. See, the subtle body is referred to as Antakarana, which means the inner instrument. So when you say inner instrument, an instrument is inert, right? It can't do anything. It has to be wielded by somebody. And that somebody is the self. But these days it's the other way around. The mind has turned us into its instrument. We became a tool in the hands of the mind instead of the other way around. So that's why the scriptures say that the first thing a seeker needs on the path is to cultivate the subtle power of discernment, or what we call viveka buddhi. Without that, we can easily end up becoming the servant of the mind's vagaries, vasanas, and delusion. But if we hone our power of discernment, we can train ourselves not to be fooled by the mind. We will fail over and over again, but as long as we don't give up, we will eventually be able to hone that skill and reduce the amount of the frequency of being duped by the mind. We'll be able to remember the right spiritual teaching at the right time, and that effectively saves us by the grace of spiritual wisdom, which comes from Amma. So how does Amma's grace reveal itself in our life? Not just you sit there and say, "Oh, Ma, save me, save me, save me." If we strive to inculcate those that spiritual wisdom in ourselves, not in someone else, in ourselves, then there's a higher likelihood that we will remember that teaching at the critical moment. And then we are saving ourselves, essentially, but through Amma's wisdom. Spiritual wisdom cannot change the external circumstances, but it can be a savior for us internally. The points in this verse are all depicting someone who has attained that spiritual wisdom, having transcended the three gunas. So Krishna says he or she is alike in pleasure and pain, abiding in their self. So how can you be alike in pleasure and pain? It seems so impossible. Because pleasure and pain basically cover most of life for us. Either something's painful or it's pleasant, or it's somewhere in between. But we should also understand that painful doesn't mean like just physical pain. It can mean something simple, just like someone misunderstanding your intentions. Or you don't get recognition for something that you did, if you wanted that recognition. It could be bad weather. You want to go out for a walk and then there's bad weather and you can't do it and you may feel sad. That's a kind of pain. Or it can be an illness. It could be your children getting in the wrong crowd and you feel helpless because you can't get them to find better friends. All these things are a kind mental pain. But in the case of the gunatitaha, they don't even have that because they know that all these things are due to the gunas. Doesn't mean you don't try to do your duty as a parent and so on, but to the point that you cannot control it, you understand that it's out of your control. And that part you don't worry about. Just think, Amma's elder brother Subhagan, the one who, had the worst friends and tried to even kill Amma at one point. Even Amma had to accept his fate. She accepted it, not like she was forced to. She understood that that was his qualities, and then he couldn't be otherwise, neither. But he was in the wrong crowd, and he went the wrong way. But she didn't, say, no, you have to find better friends, because she knew that it was not going to change him. So if Amma has to accept that, then how can we simple people expect to change other people? We can, set an example. That's the only thing we can do, she says. Set an example. If you change first, then other people may be inspired, maybe not. Don't do it for that reason, but do it anyhow. Do it because it's the right thing to do and because it's what a spiritual seeker does. So we do what we can, but we remain calm and detached internally. And pleasure is not limited to the word's common definition. Just think like when your stars are good, people will be very nice to us, agreeing with everything we say, or we may prosper, or there may be some good fortune, or so on and so on. But remember that pleasant experience, is going to change when the stars change, so we shouldn't get attached to it. It's not something that somebody else did to us. It is maybe some good karma that we had from a past life that's, fructifying, as they say in the Indian, antiquated Indian English. It means it reveals its fruit. It produces its fruits at one time, and then when that's over, then it's gone. So if you get attached to it, if you think it's yours or you deserve it, then you'll suffer afterwards. And this part is really nice. He or she regards a clod of earth, a stone, and gold to be the same. Can we do that? Very hard. So previously it was pain and pleasure experiences, and here we're talking about, or Krishna is talking about things, like rocks. So a gunatitaha sees them as being equal, while an ignorant person sees them to be extremely different, dramatically different. So if you tell somebody who's a stockbroker, what's the difference? The really high-priced stock and the low-priced stock doesn't matter. They cannot accept that because that's their life. They're gambling on Maya being one way or another. So they will never understand that. But even we, are deluded by it to some degree, because let's say, if a dirt clod falls on your head, you will think it's a bad experience. Big piece of dirt, falls on your head. But if a gold nugget of the same size fell on your head, would we be sad? We'd be like, whoa, great. What am I going to do with this? We start thinking about what we can buy, or maybe we think, I'll give it to Amma. Still, we'll be happy. But to the realized being, doesn't matter, gold, dirt, clod, it doesn't mean anything to them personally. That's the key point. It doesn't affect their personal peace of mind. Doesn't mean they don't understand that it has value, right? They know that whether it's dirt, rock, or gold, it's all anatma. It's all just the gunas. So in essence, they are no different. The difference is that in the present world, people are crazy for gold and they're not crazy for dirt clods, So it doesn't have any bearing over the joy and sorrow of a gunatitaha, because they don't have any sorrow at all. They have only joy, they have only bliss, and that's not a product of the world. So they know that these fluctuations in emotions are due to the mind, and that the gunas affect the mind. It's not that that object actually has inherent value or is inherently has no value. So people might say, if Amma sees everything as being equal, how can she run all of these charitable activities she's doing around the world? You want to help people, then you need people to support you with funds, and you need to raise funds and all that. So yes, of course, a realized being understands that. Seeing all as equal doesn't mean that they just throw things away. They understand the value on the practical level, but they also understand that it has nothing to do with their peace of mind. Amma knows that, she can help more people with a golden nugget than she can with a dirt clod. Of course she knows the difference. And she wants to help people, so she would value the gold nugget much more, in that circumstance than the dirt clod when she's trying to help people. But when we're trying to grow vegetables, you can't use a gold nugget. It's not going to help you to grow something. So there's where you need the dirt clod, or you need soil, healthy soil. So everything, the value of things is determined by our circumstances and our needs at that time. It's not inherent in these things. That's what we should understand. We attribute the value to it. So when COVID started, we saw that people were desperate for water, and the craziest, I was in India at the time, and where nobody uses toilet paper, it's, they use buckets and you wash yourself. So here are people in the supermarkets. People were sending us videos, people fighting in the supermarkets, for toilet paper. It seems so bizarre. And then people more recently were fighting for oxygen. So 1,000 years ago, people could not imagine fighting over oxygen. It's just unthinkable. But because we are in extreme times that we created ourselves, of course, suddenly something becomes valuable. So it's all our mental needs that determine what is valuable and what is not. And that doesn't affect the jnani, the knower of the self. And they are the same to the dear and the disliked. Now wait a second, why would a jnani, why would a knower of the self have people they like and dislike? They don't. That's the point. It is how other people view them. So we know that Amma doesn't have any malice or special preference to anybody, but there are people, in the early days, if you read her biography, there were people who were trying to sabotage what she was trying to do. There was a big movement, the rationalistic movement. Most of those people became devotees afterwards, actually. But at the time, they were anti. So like that, she doesn't care whether they are like that or not. She doesn't have a preference for one or the other. But the other people had different attitudes. One may show some love, some other one may treat us really poorly. Doesn't matter to the jnani, like Amma. She doesn't reciprocate like for like. It's not tit for tat. And you can tell when she started the housing project, she started off giving homes to the people who had maligned the ashram, who had maligned Amma personally, making up all kinds of stories. So the housing project is a perfect example of how Amma demonstrated her indifference to whether people like her or dislike her. And the same goes for criticism and praise. Because we can say Amma, because she's the best example for us, she understands that whatever happens only affects the anatma. So let's say somebody praises you or they criticize you, they're not talking about the consciousness, they're talking about something to do with our physical body or our subtle body. And it's all anatma, and anatma is always going to be imperfect, so who cares what they think about it? They're ignorant, we're still trying to get out of ignorance, so what does it matter what an ignorant person says about anatma, that which doesn't have any real existence? So it's just, we can just say it doesn't matter, do I want to identify with this body? If I do, then I'm going to have to deal with this criticism and praise. Otherwise, I can remind myself on this occasion that I'm not this body. I'm trying to relinquish my attachment to it. So this is a good opportunity for me to practice that when this person criticizes me or praises me. It's not like you could take the praise and reject the criticism. You have to relinquish the praise as well. So only then does it become full. So it's not even worth thinking about when people praise and criticize us. And then he says self-abiding, which is an interesting word because it means that this being, this one person who has gone beyond the three gunas, who is a knower of the self, always remembers who he or she truly is and what they are not. Amma has said, I love this quote, that's why I say it all the time. Amma once said, "There was never a time when Amma didn't know who she truly is." Now, can we say that? There's never been a time when I knew who I truly am. That's what we can say. But Amma's is the exact opposite. And she says that she never saw this world as being permanent. From the very beginning, she recognized the impermanence of this world. That is not your average person. It's not even a Jivan Mukta. We can only say she was born with that divine awareness. So from birth, she knew the difference between Anatma and Atma, which we are all still trying to grasp as adults. And she knew that she was the Atman, not the Anatman. Instead of abiding in the house of these three gunas, the body, she abides eternally in the self, and nothing can shake her out of that identification. Let us move on to verse 25. The first half we have to the first half of the first line we kind of have to pronounce all in one stretch. Mana pamanayostulyaha tulyo mitrari pakshayoho sarvarambha parityagi gunatitaha sa uchyate. The same in honor and dishonor, impartial to friend and foe, relinquishing all undertakings, he is said to have gone beyond the gunas. So I skipped the part saying the sense of doership in, because that can go in parentheses, as it is not in the original Sanskrit. So, but it's helpful, as I have said many times before, that the Ashram Gita doesn't have the commentaries, so some places where there's a danger of misinterpreting it, it seems that our team there has added a few critical words to avoid misunderstanding. So same in honor and dishonor, impartial to friend and foe, relinquishing, and in brackets, the sense of doership in all undertakings. He is said to have gone beyond the gunas. I'd like to share the commentary from Shankaracharya here first. Honor and disgrace are the same to him. He is serene. Some may consider them disinterested, others may view them as partial, friendly, or inimical. But this transcendent sage is the same to friends and foes, says the Lord. Undertakings are actions to promote purposes, seen or unseen. Seen or unseen generally refers to like what we can get in this world. And then the unseen is something either intangible or something in the afterlife. It's well known that back in Krishna's times, people were as interested in this world as they were in the afterworld, because they wanted, that's one of the issues why he has to talk about it in the Gita, about the Vedas. People were misconstruing the Vedas to be about, doing various types of rituals to get to go to heaven. So that unseen reference is also includes heaven, because it's the next life. The nature of the sage is such that he does not initiate any action. In other words, he renounces all actions except what is meant to support life in the body. Such a one is called a gunatitaha. So this means that Shankaracharya is taking it in a very strict sense. And since he was a very austere sannyasi, we can respect that in him. And we'll talk about other versions of that as well in a moment. Another commentator has said honor and dishonor, friendship and enemies. Dualities such as these exist only for the ignorant and for who are bound by the gunas. So if we have feelings of honor and dishonor, this person's my friend, this person is my enemy, that just proves that we are ignorant. That's all it is. So it's one of those things that we would like to avoid because we don't want to be ignorant. We want to be spiritually aware and grow spiritually. Now, once again, Jnanadev has some beautiful points. Whether he is, so this he here is the one who has transcended the gunas. Whether he is worshipped as God or tormented as a thief, surrounded by oxen and elephants, made a king, encircled by friends or attacked by enemies, his mind knows no defilement in the way the splendor of the sun does not know night or dawn, or the sky remains unaffected even as the seasons come and go. What a beautiful, we can relate with all those things. The sky is not affected. Here it's summertime. It's a wonderful weather in Chicago. In a few months, it'll get colder, and 6 months from now, we'll be in the winter, but the sky is completely, space is completely unaffected. Now, here of one more of his characteristics. He eliminates all actions and removes the very root of activism. The fruit of all his actions gets burnt, since he becomes like fire due to the knowledge he has acquired. Feelings such as, this is spiritual, this is worldly, take no root in his heart, with the result that he accepts with resignation whatever comes to him naturally. He feels neither pleasure nor pain, his mind having dropped all fancies and ideas and become as though it were like a stone. Now you might think, I don't want to become like a stone. Why should I become like a stone? Well, it means that it doesn't affect you, right? Just like, rain, sunshine to a stone, it's, not a big deal. The stone is just there. It's not affected by it. We're not talking about geological time, okay? We're talking about just relative time. So it doesn't affect them internally. So this verse is a continuation of the previous verse. It's about the equal vision of a jnani, of a knower of the self, amid the pairs of opposites. This phrase comes quite often, the pairs of opposites. So hot, cold, pleasure, pain, that kind of thing. Because we know, the scriptures always talk about how this world is full of duality. If there's pleasure, there's always going to be pain. If there's liking, there will be disliking. So you cannot have only one. So the first set of dualities is honor and dishonor. Earlier, Krishna referred to criticism and praise, which is verbal. Here, now this is like the mental version of that. People will feel that we are honorable, or they will feel that we're dishonorable, etc. So in some places we may receive respect, while in other places we may be treated rudely. I remember, when it was in 1997 in the fall when Amma gave us the Brahmacharya Diksha. We got the orange robes, and not these, the ones that we were all wearing about a year and a half ago. So it was a joyful day. Everybody was so, happy. And then about the next day or the day after, I realized that my Indian visa was going to expire very soon. And I actually thought I could renew it, but it turned out that I couldn't. So I had to leave the country very quickly. So I went up and ended up going to Nepal to renew my visa. And I thought, I'm wearing these robes and they were fresh, like less than a week old. And then maybe I'm India and Nepal, people will show me some respect and maybe help me, nothing at all. And when I was coming, finally, it took me about 3 weeks to get the visa because it was so difficult. And then I made my way back to India through bus, and sometimes I couldn't get a seat. I was standing. No, nobody offers any seat. The expectation of it is the problem, And then either some places people would make jokes as I was walking by, making fun of me, because my head had been shaved for that ceremony, so it was very short hair, and they just maybe thought I looked funny. So I didn't get any respect from anybody, which is how it should be. You're not supposed to expect that at all, but that was my fault. So the most painful thing that people talk about is when someone who used to show you respect starts to disrespect you. So because you're used to getting that respect from them, and then they start turning on you. So the greater the difference in treatment, the more painful it becomes. Like, let's say your kids used to listen to you, but then they stop listening to you, or your relatives, somebody gets angry at you, or your ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend doesn't show you any, is not nice to you anymore. So these are the kind of things that hurt the most because it's a huge gap in the treatment. And then just think, when old age comes, what's going to happen to us? The older the body gets, the less energy remains for doing anything. And in today's world, the people who can't do things or don't do things are devalued because it's a very Rajasik society. So we might be treated differently. At some point of time, when the body really starts to fall apart, it'll be hard to even protect our dignity, preserve our dignity, because the body doesn't care about dignity when it falls apart. That doesn't mean anything to the body. We have to surrender. There's no other way. And that's not going to be a pleasant experience for anybody who resents that, who feels they want to maintain their dignity. We'll have to just forget about honor and dishonor. Doesn't exist for one who really is immersed in spirituality. And for Amma, she doesn't care about that either, of course. There's no honor or dishonor for Amma. And they are impartial to friend and foe. Now remember, in chapter 6 and in chapter 12, Krishna referred to friend and foe. In chapter 6, verse 9, he said, "Distinguished is one who has equal regard for well-wishers, friends and foes, the indifferent and the impartial, for hateful persons and kinsmen, for saints as well as the sinful." And in chapter 12, verse 13, he said, "One who is free from malice towards all, is friendly and compassionate towards all beings, is dear to me." So both in those places and here, the point is that the jnani is impartial to all, even those who are mean to them or who are friendly to them. They're equal to, like for Amma, they're equal. And this also understands how these different sections of the Gita are all tied together. In chapter 2, Krishna was talking about the sthira prajna, or the sthita prajna, which means a realized being. And in chapter 12, it was a reference to the parabhakta. Parabhakta means the devotee who is the supreme devotee, who is actually also a knower of the self. And the gunatitaha in this chapter, which is also a knower of the self, a realized being. So all of them are realized beings, and he's referring to them with different names in different contexts. Here also we should remember that a jnani does not have friends and enemies. So God-realized people don't have those sentiments, but other people may have those sentiments towards the God-realized being. So another example would be in the Mahabharata, Yudhishthira. He did not you know the story in the Panchapandavas. Yudhishthira was the elder brother, so he kind of was the one who led everybody. And he did not consider Duryodhana, who was the worst of the Kauravas. Typically we would call them the enemies of the Pandavas, but he didn't see it like that. He didn't see Duryodhana as an enemy. He tried his best to make amends with him, and he even said he was ready to live in the same house as Duryodhana. But what about Duryodhana? He openly declared, "I can't even stand the sight of them." So that shows that the animosity was only one way. It was from Duryodhana's side, not from Yudhishthira. And Yudhishthira even had an interesting nickname, which was Ajata Shatruhu, meaning one who has no enemy. And Yudhishthira wasn't even a jnani. He was just a good person. So just think about what Amma's state must be. Even if others treat her as an enemy, she will always treat them as friends. The example that comes to mind is when Amma was in Europe once. I think it might have been Holland. A reporter came, and a lot of reporters come from different, TV channels and magazines and newspapers. Especially in Europe, the mass media coverage is quite extensive. So this person, it turned out, we didn't know, but he was like an atheist, I guess you could say. And he came with the intention of trying to trap Amma by asking a question. And then he thought that, if Amma answers like this, I will, come with a rejoinder like this, and then I'll say this if she says that, that kind of thing. He had it all worked out in his head. And so when he had his chance to ask Amma a question, he says, Amma, to you, what is God? So that's a very tricky question. What is God? Most people would go on to this long speech about what God is. And then there's always some defect in that argument, so he was ready to attack. So Amma said, you're God to me. So how can he deny that? You can say, no, I don't exist. No, you exist. Obviously that you're talking with me. So if you're my God, then God exists. She caught him totally off guard. And she didn't have any, knowing that, obviously she knows that he's trying to trap her, but she didn't feel any, resentment. He just said, you're my God, the exact opposite. So, of course, she won him over. She won his heart, and actually the interview went really well, and it not the way the reporter expected it to go. And this relinquishing all undertakings, it's really good that the ashram version has in parentheses, I put it in parentheses, the sense of doership, because technically speaking, this verse can be a reference to a sannyasi in the strict sense, like I said in Shankaracharya's commentary and a little bit in Jnanadev's commentary. It makes you get this impression that she's talking about, Krishna's talking about a sannyasi, one who has abandoned all rituals and just does sadhana all day. But in a broader sense, we can say that the intended meaning, like if we look at the way Amma would interpret it, is that it is describing any jnani, any knower of the self, because they always avoid actions for their personal benefit. They can be like one of the people who's benefited by it, but all of their actions, especially we know all of Amma's actions are for the sake of the world. So they avoid all actions where they are the sole benefactor. That is the beneficiary. So that's what it's referring to in terms from Amma's standpoint. Amma doesn't take that strict stance on sannyasa, because you see Amma's disciples are, we're doing a lot of things just because we see Amma does that, and she emphasizes the need to relinquish selfish actions, not all actions. She encourages us to serve the suffering people out of compassion, and just, we should practice that as long as it doesn't go to our head. We should live for humanity, for all beings, and for the world. And if that involves a lot of actions, especially in Kali Yuga when so many people are suffering, so be it. Doesn't mean that you don't do anything even when people are suffering. She has said many quotes that lead us to understand that part of her teachings. She says, "Be like the incense stick that burns itself and spreads the fragrance of love and compassion all around. Be like the candle that provides light to one and all, even as it consumes itself. Through my children's selfless actions, may the world understand that the beauty of selfless service has not disappeared from the face of this earth." Isn't that beautiful? How she so much trust and she invests in her children. So we, makes us want to, really go out and help people when she talks about her children in that way. And the person described in this verse is obviously a gunatitaha, one who has gone beyond the gunas, that same topic the whole time. He or she maintains their equipoise in all circumstances, like we've seen. And in chapter 2, verse 38, there is a quote from Krishna that Amma loves to, cite. It is samatvam yoga uchyate, which means evenness of mind is yoga. And I'm bringing this up because here we need to understand a distinction between two types of samatvam, evenness of mind. In chapter 2, it was in the context of karma yoga. So, if a karma yogi has evenness of mind, what is the difference between his and the evenness of mind of a jnani, of Amma's evenness of mind? There must be some difference, right? So, this is how I have understood it. A karma yogi strives to attain and maintain an even mind, but the outcome of their effort is limited by the self-centered desires in their mind. I mean, that goes for all of us too. We try to be selfless, but we have a lot of deep-seated desires within us that we have yet to discard. And those are the delimiting factor in how far we can go in trying to be selfless. So for us, equipoise does not come naturally. It takes a lot of work because it's going against the grain of our vasanas. And Amma even said it's like swimming upstream, right? Or maybe someone of the person who spoke this morning might have said that. Either way, there was a quote, someone said, it's like Amma says that it's like swimming upstream to try to be selfless because the mind is always interested in the self. I mean, the little self. But this equipoise comes spontaneously and naturally to Amma and to any knower of the self. It's like your mother tongue. You don't have to struggle to speak in that language. At least, maybe you don't speak eloquently, but you know how to speak your mother tongue. You're thinking in that, you're living in that. You are an embodiment of that. It's already part and parcel of your being. So it's impossible to relinquish it. The same goes for Amma. She can never relinquish the language of compassion, selflessness, humility, and all these divine qualities. She can never relinquish that feeling of oneness with all of her children. So here's where we can get an idea of what we might look like to Amma, because our feeble efforts to speak the language of spirituality are probably very humorous for Amma. Like when people try to communicate in a foreign language. To get a glimpse of how we must appear from Amma's perspective, let us look at a few examples of real-life translations very confidently posted in foreign tourist spots. This is all true. Here are a few examples. On the menu of a Swiss restaurant, our wines leave you nothing to hope for. Outside of a Hong Kong tailor shop, customers may have a fit upstairs. In the window of a general store in Mexico, why go somewhere else and get cheated when you can come right here? And then a travel agency in Tokyo has a sign that says, "Why don't you go away?" And my favorite, which is completely bizarre, is on a pair of little pink plastic Hello Kitty sandals, obviously for little kids. And this is in China. And on it in English it says, "I smoke old stogies." What? You have like your 3-year-old kid and it's just like, who knows? Maybe our mistakes on the path of spirituality will seem cute to Amma like these mistakes. Like this morning, Niranjan, he said something, I don't think there was any translation, so I'll just tell you, those of you who didn't catch it. It was something he wanted to say, "I bow down to Amma's feet thousands of times." But he got the words mixed up and he said, I bow down thousands of times to Niranjan's feet. Everybody exploded in laughter, and Amma, when she was laughing so hard, she had to like hold her ribs because it was painful. I mean, it's sad, but she's relishing it somehow, even though it makes her ribs hurt. So this is maybe hopefully our attempts will at least invoke her grace because we're kind of cute in that sense. So in sum, the evenness of mind we struggle to achieve is the easiest thing in the world for Amma. It is her constant experience because she is established in samatvam and she is ever unshaken. Shankaracharya says here, the characteristics set forth in verses 23 to 25 demand effort to achieve. The seeker of liberation has to cultivate them as they are the means leading to the transcendental state. Once secured, however, these characteristics become directly discernible in the gunatitaha as his unique marks. And Jnanadev says, know that only a person who conducts themselves in this way is truly beyond the gunas. It's a tall order. It's a very high hurdle to cross, but that shows that Amma is beyond the gunas. She is God realized for sure. And with this verse, the explanation of how a gunatita, or how a realized being conducts themselves, that is the end of this topic. What remains from Arjuna's original, I think it was 6 questions, right? And the final question is how to become a jnani. Jnanadev says here, enough of this. Now hear by what means and ways he transcends the 3 gunas. And last time I didn't answer the questions, so today I have to use the remaining time to answer the questions, so we will have to save that topic for next week. We only covered 3 verses, but actually there's only 2 more verses left in the chapter, so we will definitely finish next time. Now I will look at the questions. There were so many last time, and then again I looked because there was a gap. There were so many questions. I know I won't finish them tonight, but I'll get as far as I can. The first one. This is a reference to the story I told some time back about a dog that I used to take care of when I was in Japan before I joined the ashram. And I had narrated that the dog died the morning I left for India. Before I died, of course. Before I left. No, the dog went to India and I died. Sorry. The dog died on the morning I was supposed to go to India, but I hadn't gone yet. That's how I know it died. So this person says, isn't it possible your dog died of a broken heart? I don't know. You'd have to ask the dog, but it probably has reincarnated multiple times since then. That was about 30 years ago. So are dogs less deserving of our love? If a person were dying, our care would be termed compassion, but for a dying dog, it is merely attachment. Don't we all share the same consciousness? If we're all one, then the love for a baby puppy, yeah, of course. And the love for a cockroach, oh, wow, this person has a very broad mind. Is still love. Isn't love attachment? Amma says her religion is the religion of love. I understand that the suffering is worse when it is me, my, mine, but it doesn't mean that the slaughter of cows, pigs, and chickens doesn't hurt terribly as well. All the injustices towards the animal and plant kingdoms is hugely painful. So do we not have attachment only because of the suffering it will cause us? Because attachments are sandbags that will drag us down. Seems very selfish in a way, like we are still propagating me, mine, at the expense of others, blah, blah. Okay. Anyhow, it's a long question, and it's a nice question in the sense that it's coming from a sense of compassion. It's coming from identification with other beings, not just people who are nice to us, So, and it's kind of a fitting question after hearing all the things that Krishna said tonight. Yes, but love versus attachment is a very clearly delineated line, and I think we can talk about that. Real love is never about me. It's always about other people. It's not how that person makes me feel. It's how I. It's a unconditional feeling that goes out to everybody. So there's no expectation. There's no calculation. There's no haggling. No bartering with the other person. There's no exchange of love necessarily. It's just I am love. That's what Amma says. Real love is actually a manifestation of your being. So it should not be conditional, and there should be no me mixed in there. So it's not about what I need, what I want, what I feel, what I don't feel, all these kind of things. So attachment is quite different from all that. And love is constant. That's another thing to remember. Love is constant. It's unconditional, and it's spontaneous. So whereas attachment is the opposite of all these things. It comes and goes. We are nice to people who are nice to us. We want something from them, so we, show our so-called love, which is basically a transformation of our attachment into being sweet for a short period of time. And it's all about me, how you make me feel. And then if you love me, it's because how I make you feel. And if you don't make me feel like that anymore, then my love is gone, right? So that means my attachment is what we're talking about, not love. And whether someone responds in doesn't matter. We still have that because it is my nature to express love. But in the case of attachment, we haven't reached that point, so we find that our identification is determining our so-called nature. That wrong tendency creates a wrong nature in us, which is attachment. And so it's conditional, and if we don't get it back, then it's just a matter of time before we stop loving that person, which is actually impossible if it really were love. And so the question, it boils down to how to relinquish all of those attachments that we're looking for from people. We want them to do things that make us feel better, or feel better about ourselves, or feel better, period. And Amma says that the only way to relinquish all those attachments is to have a higher goal in life, to have a laksha. So that laksha bodha, a higher principle, a higher goal in life, is the only way to relinquish these lower tendencies that we have. So if we don't have a goal like that, then we'll wander aimlessly trying to get anything from anybody, and it'll only end up in sorrow. So if caring for animals can be a goal in life, instead of trying to take care of ourselves only, so it shows that an expansion of the mind. But if we don't want to suffer when the animals suffer, we have to imbibe these teachings, because compassion doesn't mean necessarily that you have to hurt inside. Compassion is not sorrow. Compassion is just sharing people's pain. That's all. But it's not our pain. We're just sharing in it, and we can feel it, but not as our own. So when that's over, it's over for us also. Like when Amma was traveling on the roads in India, I probably told this before, but she he was driving through some state where there's a water shortage, and there was a like a faucet that had been left open, and the water was just gushing out. And when Amma saw that, she said to the Swami next to her, "I feel like my own blood is gushing out of that faucet." Because so many people don't have water. This is a crime, you know. She didn't say that, but she was acting as though it was like a crime. And so she feels that pain, but she didn't feel like that before she saw it, and she doesn't have to feel like that all day long. But it's a spontaneous response to what she saw. So it's not her pain. She's thinking all the people who could have made use of that water just to save their life one day, you know, it's wasted here. So that's terrible. So like that, it's not, you know, that's not attachment. That's feeling, momentarily feeling that other person's suffering, and then the next thing comes. It doesn't stay there. We don't retain it like baggage. It's a spontaneous thing. Okay, I think that's enough for this. It's a very vast subject. There's a lot more things we could say about it. This person says, I am younger than Amma, and I feel I have to put a lot of efforts to improve on the path. What will happen if Amma departs from the earth before I can reach a meaningful point? I apologize if the question is rude. I thought someday a question like this might come. Well, my response to that would be that a small child who has full surrender never asks his mother, doesn't even think of asking his mother how long she will be with him. He has completely, or she has completely surrendered themselves. There's so much surrender that he never even thinks of that. It never occurs to him that his mother will be gone. And whatever happens, he knows that his mother will protect him and make sure he receives whatever help he needs. The mother will always have that child's intent, best welfare in mind. So, it never really occurred to me, this question, I thought someday somebody might ask this. And so that thought in my mind is like, why don't I ever think about that? Because I feel I have enough faith that Amma has a plan, and it's not, who knows, I could die this second. And Amma can outlive me by 100 years, right? We don't know these things. So why even think about it? Just have faith in Amma. And Amma can manifest herself in many ways. So just have faith and don't worry about that. Also, at the same time, we should not be lazy and say, oh, Amma will make it happen. We should make the most of our time with her. Don't think that, we can just, lollygag around and then go when we feel like it. We should try to get as much Amma as we can while we're in this body. So at least for now, the live streams you can see and benefit from that. I often hear Swami, I guess that's me, mentioning about a daily morning live stream. Yes, 2 people asked about that. You can send an email, and actually there, I think at the top of this, the comments on the side, the very top, there's a link to that address where you can send an email. We're already over time. I'll take one more question because I'm so behind on the questions. Can I apply chapter 13 Jnana Yoga, then the yoga of knowledge concept, while doing seva? Of course. I think this promotes more detachment. Or should I say to my mind, everything is the Guru's wish? Actually, they're not mutually exclusive, I don't think. I don't know if the mind plays tricks if I always keep implementing the same technique. Does having broader spiritual tools help the sadhak? Yes, definitely. Because, those examples that I gave earlier, like how to, that seva job, for example, there's a sattvic, Rajasik, and tamasic reaction to them. So, at any given time, we may need a different approach. So we had talked about it, basically when the mind is being tamasic, we have to engage in rajas, that you can't suddenly catapult yourself to to sattva. And when the mind is rajasic, then the goal is to sublimate that into sattva. So depending on how you are at that moment, how your body, your mind, energy are at that time, you have to apply the appropriate technique. And you can apply all Gita techniques and all of Amma's teachings during karma yoga. Whatever is needed at that moment. Like just all these things we just read. If someone criticizes you for doing it wrong, you can remind yourself, well, what is he or she criticizing? It's maybe I'm slow. Well, that's not me. That's the body. I didn't catch on so quickly. That's my intellect. It's not me. So they may be, insulting me for that, or they may be praising me for that, but neither one of them should affect me because I'm none of those. This is precisely the attitude we need to employ all the tactics that Amma gives. We have a big arsenal of spiritual techniques that we can apply to preserve our equanimity, because that way not only will we remain peaceful, but we won't hurt others. When our mind is peaceful, we won't even think of hurting others. So it's ahimsa, and we also don't create more karma for ourselves. So we need to adjust our attitude according to the circumstances, definitely. Okay, one last question, just to make up for not doing them last time, and then we'll have a very short meditation. I came to know that Ajna Chakra, the sixth chakra, is not directly connected to the seventh chakra, Sahasrara. Is it that one can maximum go to Ajna Chakra by spiritual practices? Is Guru's help needed to progress to seventh chakra for liberation? Definitely. I mean, first of all, I wouldn't recommend like an over obsession about like the chakras. Sometimes they're good for visualizing and focusing our energy, like in meditation. But if we're looking at, trying to open the chakras, by some techniques, we might find that we're a little too heavy on the technique side, and we need some inner, what would you say, like introspection of why our mind is running after those kind of things. And, and certainly the Sahasrara chakra cannot be, attained or opened or, completely, we cannot reach that and abide there without the grace of the Guru. In fact, it's not even considered to be a chakra in the traditional scriptures. They refer to the six chakras, and the Sahasrara is like beyond. So yes, we need Amma's grace, but you can also think of it as just liberation. We need Amma's grace for liberation. It's not like a doing, or it's not something that you really try super hard and then you get liberation. Because that means liberation is a product of our activity, which is impossible because it's infinite and our actions are always finite. So we can get to the threshold, we can make a lot of effort, get there, get close, but ultimately to go from being this limited, identified with this limited body and mind, to identifying with the Supreme Absolute, which is infinite, the only thing that will get us that far is Guru's grace. You need somebody who is infinite to help you enter the infinite. So even the yearning to do sadhana, where does that come from? We need some grace. We don't have control over this yearning necessarily. Sometimes we may feel like doing it, sometimes we may feel like I don't want to do anything. So that is better to think that we're doing nothing and that everything is only due to divine grace. Everything is coming from the Guru's grace. Otherwise, a lot of ego will be mixed in with all of our sadhana, and that's going to spoil everything. We'll end up going backwards. So when in doubt, just feel that everything is from the Guru and nothing is due to me. She's just, putting up with me. And despite all my shortcomings, she's still helping me along the path. That's a safer way from the spiritual standpoint. Namah Shivaya. So since it is just a brief meditation tonight, we'll just start the meditation straight away without any closing mantras, and we'll chant Asatoma and Loka at the end. Close your eyes. Check your posture. And slow down the breathing process. With each long, deep breath, feel the mind slowing down and going deeper and deeper. As a practical application of today's verses, reflect on the day's events and just identify one situation where you found it challenging to maintain your peace of mind. Once you identify such an occasion, imagine yourself, visualize yourself applying these teachings, putting them into practice in the moment. What would the outcome have been if you did so? How would your experience have been different if you applied these teachings at that moment? Visualize yourself keeping an even mind, complete equanimity, and you remain peaceful. So make a mental note that indeed you may have lost your peace of mind momentarily, but there was an option at the time. Due to our lack of awareness, we unknowingly gave up, we forfeited our freedom of choice. So next time, with a little more awareness, we may be able to exercise our freedom to not get caught up and end up suffering. May that remembrance persist in our heart. Now let us close with the usual closing mantras. Take a deep breath. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, you can slowly open your eyes if you wish. Om Amriteshwari Namaha. Thank you so much for joining us. Just to let you know, this Saturday the bhajans will come from the East Coast. And we will most likely have the Gita class again next Thursday. But we are a little unsure because we have Amma's Guru Purnima on the 24th. It is going to be in the morning, US time. And we're expecting there to be a Amma program of Guru Purnima on the day before that, Friday night. This is all I'm not sure if it's already public information or not, but it will be very soon. And so based on how the preparations for Guru Purnima go on Saturday, not this Saturday, following Saturday, we'll see what happens with the Gita class next week. Om Namah Shivaya.